आप कुछ सुनाई नहीं आ रहा है। आप नहीं होगा शायद कुछ। आप मैं कुछ सुन नहीं सकती। हेलो हेलो, आप मैं कुछ सुन नहीं सकती ना। कोई ऐसा तैसा आवाज आ रही है ऐसे कैसे? साउंड नहीं है।
Hello everyone.
हाँ
Hello
हाँ
everyone. A very good morning to
आवाज जम जाता है। कुछ नहीं, आवाज जम जाता है। गुलफिशन मैम का कोई आवाज नहीं आती कि कोई आवाज नहीं आती।
circles in the academia, some of her books. I would like to tell you, which we have got in our seminar as well, Ideas and Society in India from the 16th to the 18th centuries, which was published in 1996, Urban Crafts and Craftsmen in India, 13th to 18th century, and latest is Medieval Indian Mind Escapes. And also she has written a book with the renowned Indian scholar, Professor D.N. Jha, Mind Over Matter. So students, now I would like to be in between Professor Vanina and you. She is going to deliver a lecture on the theme Imported Past, Orientalist Perception of the History of India. So now over to you, Professor Eugenia Vanina. Over to you now. Thanks.
थैंक यू, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया गुलफिशान साहबा। And I am very, very happy to be at least virtually in Aligarh, which I like very much. And your library, Maulana Azhar Library, and your campus, your university are only making me happy in my memories. Tell me, please, am I audible? Am I audible? So then let us start. What is imported history? You know that history is a record of the past, which every nation, every people, every group of people, maybe community, this keeps this record through time. Of course, something may be changed, something may be reviewed, but nevertheless, this record exists. Now, now the question about Indian history is that Indian history has ordained it in such a way that most of historical records which the Indian people study at schools, universities, and colleges, as scholars research and so on, they are a little bit foreign. They are imported. Because India is a country which has been a victim of colonial exploitation for around 2 centuries or even a little bit more. When we study colonialism, we usually speak about wealth drain, economic exploitation, and so are many other political domination, sometimes racism, but we do not take into consideration sometimes that colonialism is a domination not only over your present, I mean the people who live in this epoch, but their past. And even when colonialism goes, this domination remains because it takes every nation, every people, huge time to develop its own approach to history. While independent India is quite a young state, because this time is nothing historically, I mean, in the sense of history. Colonialism controls, to repeat, not only your present, not only your life, the life of this generation, but it controls the past. When the British Raj was established in India, it became so important for the British to present their own concept of Indian history. I would not insist that this is something which was done purposely. Come on, we shall distort their past. No, nothing like that. Everybody coming to another country tries to explore it and to contemplate on it and to present what kind of its culture you can imagine and its past and its history. That's normal, nothing special about it. But when the scholars who study it belong to the dominating power, to the ruling elite, and when they are not just findings, but their imagination becomes a law, becomes a part of the state policy, and is being inculcated into the minds of the local population, then it's a different thing. You know, the British Orientalists who came to India, they structured and imagined its history, which they studied, starting from Sanskrit, on a West European model. In West Europe, there has been a great and luminary antiquity, ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Then we shall also imagine such an antiquity in India. Not just we should, but because they did not understand that there could be some other pattern, nor they thought that there should be something different from European. Whatever they saw in their native country, I mean in Great Britain, okay, in France, in Europe, was relevant for the whole world. They could not understand that other people of the world could live differently, on different models, on different patterns. So there should be brilliant antiquity, yes. They studied Sanskrit from Brahmins. They were very upset because real competent Pandits did not want or did not find it necessary to cooperate with them. They found some people who would do it for money. As you know that in Brahmanical Hinduism, one of the greatest sins for the Brahmin is to teach for money. But they found such people. They studied texts, and they decided that there has been a great and glorious epoch of ancient India. We can only thank those people for studying Sanskrit, for bringing to life to light the masterpieces of ancient India. They did not only study, they translated it into European language, many languages, and published. In my country, Russia, for example, the first episodes from Mahabharata were published at the end of the 18th century, translated, of course, not from Sanskrit. There were no Russians who could translate, but from English. So we should be thankful for them. But we cannot be thankful for them for glorifying and idealizing this medieval India. As it happened in Europe, as you know quite well as historians, the Roman Empire was crushed by the barbarians, so-called barbarians. Now, the same pattern they applied to India. Barbarians came and destroyed this beautiful Hindu civilization. That this civilization was not totally Hindu, that there was great contribution by Buddhists and Jains, that whatever they call Hindu was a little bit different. I do not want to discuss this to avoid diverting our topic. Now, who were the barbarians? Of course, the Muslims. They came, they destroyed, and they established their horrible, tyrannous rule. Interestingly, Sir William Jones, who was the founding fathers of European Indology, who was a real scholar and the founder of Royal Asiatic Society, when he came to India, he already had the nickname of Oriental Jones. Why? Because while still living in his home country, he studied Persian and published many translations from Persian classics. But interestingly, when this gentleman comes to Calcutta, comes to India, he was totally not interested in the legacy and culture of not just Indian Muslims, but on the legacy and culture of so many Hindus who also studied Persian, or at least Hindustani. And you know pretty well that knowledge of Persian was widely spread among educated people of both their communities, Hindus and Muslims. For Sir William Jones, Persian does not exist. I mean, for India. The legacy, the medieval Muslim legacy of India does not exist. Even Bengali, the vernacular spoken language which he heard every moment entering Kolkata streets, did not exist for him, only Sanskrit. Interestingly, when he translated, when the texts like Gita Govinda were translated, they were also declared as ancient, although Gita Govinda was around 11th century. If he took some European text, that will be, everybody will say medieval, 11th century CE, but they call it ancient. Because for Europeans of the time, to be connected with antiquity was a label of being civilized. I will tell you one more example from my own country. You know, Russia is a young country compared to India. We have veritable records of our history, say from 8th, 9th century Common Era. But all this early medieval text and literature, and medieval, we call ancient Russia. We do it after the 19th century scholars. Because they used to call it, because it was a shame for a country not to have ancient tradition. We call it ancient Russia when they're talking about, I don't know, 15th, 14th century texts. What is that? Is it ancient? It is medieval. So starting from Sir William Jones, Indian history was viewed as a history of degradation of the great ancient Sanskrit civilization. First, because of its own shortcomings, and then due to the due to these horrible invaders who came and destroyed. Interestingly enough, after Sir William, in 19th century, the situation in Europe itself has changed. Europeans discovered its own Middle Ages, which before they disdained, they hated. The word medieval was a synonym for barbarous, cruel, and dark. The notion of dark Middle Ages was a stable term in European historical writings. Now, in the 19th century, Europeans started being interested in their medieval history and started appreciating it. What happened? In the countries where capitalism has been established, people began to realize that those people of big money have something wrong in them. And they are maybe not noble, not generous. Like these medieval warriors and knights, they could be barbarous, they could be ignorant, but they had something in their mind better than money. They had the faith in their religion, they had the loyalty of their suzerain, their king, they had the love of their lady, and at the same time, they were not living and dying for money. Thus, it became very fashionable to read medieval texts. Thus, the star of Sir Walter Scott rose at the skies, first of Scotland, then of England, then of Europe. Then Alexander Dumas came with his medieval romances, and so many people of the world. And that was on the common people level. But on the level of historians, they also started understanding that medieval period was a very important period in history, not only of destruction, but of construction, of constructing new nation states, new languages, new cultures, many crafts, many technologies, literatures, and so on, that without medieval, there would have been no modernity. Well, and good. Now what about India? The same people who, while writing about Indian history, they refused to write and to understand the validity of medieval period in the history of India. They refused totally. Even when they studied it, and they had to study medieval history of India, because in Indian provinces, in Indian princely states, in Indian territory, they had to deal with many landowners who would produce to them the documents, the land documents, written, granted by medieval rulers like the Mughals or before Mughals or after Mughals. They had to deal with this. They had to deal with the legacy of the Mughals. They had to study it just to manage the territory. They had to study. That's why Ain Akbari was translated in 1800 into English. The first medieval text translated. You will correct me about Firishta, that Alexander Doe, but it was not a translation or as such. It was just a rendering. But nevertheless, Firishta and then Abul Fazl, they all became to be known to European public. They were translated into English. Why? Because the British had to deal with the legacy, not of the Guptas, not of the Mauryas, but of the Mughals, Nizam of Hyderabad, and other rulers. But to recognize, to evaluate this period was not possible for them at all. You remember the preface to the history of India as known by its own historians, by Eliot and Dawson. What horrible abuse is shown on medieval Muslim rulers. That they built beautiful palaces, mosques, and other edifices, not for the people, but to glorify themselves. Of course, European monarchs, when they did the same, when they built palaces and cathedrals, they did it only for the benefit of the people. They didn't want to glorify themselves. No doubt about it, as you understand. Moreover, Eliot and Dawson are full of contempt towards the Hindu writers who wrote in Persian and wrote Persian chronicles like Chandrabhan Brahman and many other of them. Why? Because they were not expressing hatred towards the invaders. That those people embodied a certain imperial Hindu-Muslim, Indo-Persian, or whatever you call it, culture, that they became integrated into the fold of the Mughal Empire, never came to their mind. In the 20s, 30s of the 19th century, a bomb exploded in Indonesia. This bomb was the book by Colonel James Todd. James Todd, as you know it well, was a Scottish officer who was sent to Rajputana to negotiate with the local Rajas to bring them into the fold of the establishing British Empire by subsidiary treaties and so on. Back home, he wrote his famous book, Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan, which came as a bomb explosion. The whole of medieval India realm and studies, not only the writers, the journalists, showered criticism on this book as never before, as if it touched their own, some of their own interests. Todd's book became very popular in colonial India. It became a textbook. But it was published with a huge introduction by Rawlinson. More than 100 pages, I think, or even more. Interestingly, long after the death of the author, long, you publish a book with a huge introduction pointing to the reader where Todd had been wrong. I do not know of a similar example connected with any other book on Indian history. It means that this book was viewed by colonial propaganda, what should I say, as something dangerous. It is good, it is interesting, but people have to be explained that there are many mistakes in this book. You know that, for example, even now, when Western media quotes some information given, for example, by the Russian media, they always say Russian propaganda channel, Russian propaganda media, Russian state media, to show that it's all wrong. The same happened with the book of James Todd. People should know that he had made many mistakes. Well, you can read about Raja, Rani, this kind of thing, but I understand that it's not a historical right. Why? Of course, did Todd make mistakes? No doubt about it. He hardly knew any Indian language. He was working with the local specialists, with the bards, charans, bhats of Rajasthan. He listened to them. He could not, maybe he misunderstood many things. Of course, he made mistakes, like, for example, attributing the origin of the Rajputs to the Scythians and so on and so forth. But mistakes are inevitable, everywhere and anywhere. But what was Todd's primary mistake according to the view of colonial Indology? He has shown that India had a medieval period, and this medieval could be glorious. not just Oriental despotism, not just horrible things which Eliot and Dawson would later on highlight in Mughal Chronicles, but a glorious story of heroism, of being valiant warriors, and so on sacrifice and so on. Moreover, Todd's most dangerous assumption was that Rajputs had feudalism. Feudalism is a very difficult concept to discuss. There are many pros and cons, there are many discussions even now. But the question of Todd's critics were not in his misunderstandings in feudalism, if any. The question was that India could not have feudalism. It was impossible for them. Why? Because if India had antiquity and feudalism, then India was able to have modernity. That India developed, given all its peculiarities, on the same historical laws as other countries. What is feudalism? What is medieval period? It is the corporations, it is the guilds, it is the formation of nations, it is the formation of vernacular literatures, it is the many cultural and technical achievements. This was not possible for India because by the time of Todd, it has begun to be established that India did not develop. For example, James Mill said that Europeans found India in the same level of development as Alexander of Macedon did. So it means that since Alexander's time, India did not change. Another concept which gradually replaced this. Yes, India changed, but only to degradation. Even Sir William Jones said that you should not think that India has been always so degraded as it is now. Moreover, this concept of degradation penetrated deeply. You read Vincent Smith. It is totally, the whole story is the story of degradation. But if India came to medieval feudal civilization, then it is not degradation, it is historical development. And to many sides parallel to the European one. How can it be allowed? How it can be allowed? You remember that when, after the mutiny, the British started placating the native Indian princes and Indian elite, giving them the totally Mughal, medieval titles like Rao Bahadur, giving them knightly ranks like Sir and so on and so forth. The British, there was huge protests in Britain. They said, why? The brown Sir will find himself equal to the white Sir. What are you doing? And now you see Todd, who was showing the chivalrous tradition of the Rajputs. The chivalrous tradition of the Rajputs, that they had chivalry, that they had many feudal institutions close to medieval Europe and so on. Then what shall we do? It is so dangerous. It is extremely dangerous because if you make it such an assumption, then India was developing. And there was another so-called gross mistake, so-called, made by Todd. Todd, in his book, has proven that India, in his case, Rajput territories, but this could be easily extended towards India, had historical thinking. One of the main postulates of colonial Indology was that India had no historical thinking. That Indians were people who did not care. I mean, by Indians, in this case, I mean especially Hindus, non-Muslims, because for Muslims, they recognized the historical tradition, but found it very bad, very cruel, very immoral, and so on. as if all medieval European kings were angels in flesh. But for Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, and so on, they considered India had no historical tradition, that they were not caring. They invented all kinds of explanations for that. The Hindu people, Indian people, in pre-Muslim period spent generations looking up to the skies, contemplating about the divinity, the immortal, and not about their contemporary life. At the same time, they were talking about extremely conservative character of Indian tradition, of Indian people. But if Indian tradition are based upon the conservatism, then it is a tradition of the past. And to base your tradition upon the past, you have to think about the past. You have to know about your past. This logical discrepancy never came to the mind of the Orientalists. No sources, no text, no Herodotus, no Thucydides, nobody. There is nothing about history in pre-Muslim India, so-called. You know, the problem is that if you are looking, you are sure that something does not exist, you will not look for it. Really, if you think that something is impossible in this world, you are not going to look after it. The question was that the British scholars and the Orientalists of all over the world, they were sure that if there is no historical text written in India before, apart from the Muslim chronicles, then why should you search for them? This horrible misconception began to be challenged only quite recently. I usually joke, have me blindfolded, give me any book on medieval India, and I will say that in the introductory, they said the paucity, the non-availability of historical documents. I will not know the author, I will not know the book, but there will be definitely such lamentations. Maybe you will consider me impolite, but let me tell you that among the countries of the globe, India is the most, perhaps, less researched upon history. If in any country, including my own, some historian comes across and finds a hitherto unknown European medieval text, a chronicle, a document, or something, it will be a sensation. It will be a sensation in all newspapers. And if it is a very important text, some chronicle or something like that, if the person finds it and researches upon it, for example, in my country, it will be a state prize. In India, any PhD student will go to the archive, pick up a worm-eaten, dusty, rusty text from the heaps of the unexplored texts and documents, and write down his or her thesis. It is not because the Indian people are lazy. It is not because Indian people are careless about their history. It is because it had been inculcated in the brains for generations that whatever Indians had written about their past, especially not in Persian, it is not history. It is myth. It is concoction. It is composition. Why? Because according to the European scholars, those texts which were available, they were literary texts, not historical. They did not they did not possess historical authenticity, or they did not possess research material. Because history should be, as taught by the great German historian Leopold von Ranke, it should be dry, it should be archival record, it should be annual, and it should be annually recorded events without any emotions, without any literary things, and so on and so forth. In Europe itself, such an idea had been long ago overcome by the scholars. They analyze medieval romances, which are very close in spirit and in values with Prithviraj, Russell, and so on. And they understand that it is a peculiar type of historicity, that different epochs differ from each other, not only by tools, weapons, and dresses, and technologies, and so on, but by historical thinking. That medieval people all over the world had a peculiar way of historical thinking. And if so, to reproach medieval texts with the lack of modern historicity is like to reproach medieval kings for not using air force in their battles. It is history. It was history. It was a great undertaking by Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society, I think in 2010 or something around that, or when they carried a special volume of non-Persian sources on the history of Aurangzeb. They discussed huge number of sources where the Aurangzeb's policies had been analyzed, described, and so on. We may remember the lamented Alison Bush, who was working on non-Persian sources. It is not to devalue the Persian sources of Indian history. It is just to understand that before the coming of Muslims and after, all peoples, all communities of India had their historical writings and feelings. They recorded it, they analyzed the historical past. They reconstructed it, and it is our duty of we, the historians, who should study those documents. Any science, any field of knowledge, history being no exception, develop through overcoming mistakes. As a present day, your fellow student from science faculty knows more about physics than Newton. It's normal. And this student may open Newton's books and mark so many mistakes in his physical discussions and in his physical contemplations. It's normal. But some mistakes prove very dangerous when they are coming to obstruct the development of history, of this science or this field of research. Same happened with this imported history. Same happened, especially with the concept of Indians being ahistorical or non-historical. An uncountable number of sources, temple records, family records, documents, historical poems, historical romances, all kinds of them are waiting for their researchers in all the Indian languages, including Persian, which I also consider in this case an Indian language. And it is the job of the younger generation of historians to rectify this horrible mistake of ignoring the wealth under your feet. It is not bad to have an imported history. This history, imported, was as it was inculcated into the minds of the generations of historians. When I came to India, and it was, my God, 1971, sorry, 1979, epoch ago, I was shocked to see even in the library catalogs the division between Hindu history period and Muslim period. I I was shocked that this lived from the time of James Mill. Then we know pretty well that there is no Hindu period, there is no Muslim period, as there is no Christian period. Jawaharlal Nehru has noticed it long ago, but it was still there. Being thankful, being so thankful for many of the Orientalists who discovered masterpieces of ancient Indian architecture, who deciphered the languages like Pali and so on, who could understand the Ashoka's edicts and so many other great things. Being grateful to them, I think we should develop as far as India is concerned, its national school of historical approach, not just to negate everything which the Western scholars have written. It is not the case, but to bring together the historical culture and tradition of all the peoples and communities of India. And as you are students of one of the best historical faculties in the Indian universities, with such glorious traditions, I have full hope that you will be able to contribute to this as much as possible. Thank you, and will be keen to answer any question. Thank you. So please, any questions? Hello? Hello?
Hello,
Any questions, please?
good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Yes,
Nice.
ma'am. My question is,
भाई साहब दोबारा कर दीजिए, इको होती है ना, दोबारा बताइए. आवाज चला जाता है. ओ ओ ओ ओ और कुछ नहीं.
hello, ma'am.
Yes, yes, yes.
Am I
Please
audible?
try to say.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you so much for this enlightening lecture, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, I am from Ladakh, and I saw in the central we have two museums in Ladakh, and in one of the Central Asian Museum, I saw in many transit permits and other documents that talks about the trade exchange between Tibet or northwestern region with Russia and other regions. So, ma'am, have you come across any textbook which elaborately talks about the Tibetan relation with Russia or northwestern relation with Russia in medieval or modern times, ma'am? If you
Indian relations with Russia. Yes, there are many texts,
Yes, I mean, the
especially
context of trade or anyhow.
try to get the books by Surendra Gopal. because they had, but with the try to read the books by Surendra Gopal, and there is one book, PM Camp Bharat Rus, where the travelers and traders are being highlighted, who traded between India and Russia. I'm not sure that a place like Ladakh was a part of this trade, because geographically it was very difficult to reach. But then try, especially Professor Surendra Gopal's works. Any more, please? But please try to speak clearer, because the sound ऐसे चलता है.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Please. Please don't be shy and ask me any questions about whatever I said or any other questions. Hello? कोई सुनता है मेरी बात की नहीं?
Yes, ma'am.
Please. तो सवाल तो पूछिए. अगर सवाल नहीं है तो मैंने जो कुछ कहा बहुत बोरिंग था. कोई सवाल भी नहीं था सुनने का.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. It was interesting, ma'am.
हाँ, लेकिन कोई कुछ पूछता नहीं. कोई कुछ पूछता ही नहीं.
मैम कुछ पूछने का है ही नहीं, क्या पूछ?
Yes, please. Speak louder, please.
Hello.
Yes, speak.
Hello.
Hello. बोलिए. हाँ, बोल दीजिए.
I am Mahendra Pratap from AMU.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, my question is, during the freedom struggle in the Indian.
दोबारा कहिए, कितना मुश्किल है. महेंद्र प्रताप जी, प्लीज बोलिए आगे.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, during the freedom struggle in the India, there are two conflicts, Oriental and Western, Orientalist and Anglistic. Then the Russian scholars or Russian political figures favor which types of thought, Orientalist or Anglistic?
I think Orientalist, and what was second he told?
Anglistic.
Analytic.
English, yes.
Oh.
English and Orientalist. There are two ideologies.
Yes, there are concepts. There are different concepts, and I do not call upon you to discard all of them. I only think that a country like India is worthy of its own historical school, and it does have it already. It does have it, because Aligarh Muslim University has been a place where this school was to a certain extent founded. Because as for medieval India, we cannot study medieval India without the contribution of Aligarh historians. Whatever you like or do not like. Of course, it is not only centered on Aligarh, but Aligarh was a trailblazer to what I say rehabilitate or acquit medieval India in the Indian historical tradition. That was a great departure from Orientalistic views and Orientalistic concepts, which considered medieval India, especially after the formation of the Muslim states, as just degradation and barbarism. Aligarh historians, starting with Professor Muhammad Habib, Irfan Habib, and so many of them, great scholars, they just contributed greatly, and they created. But I think that the Oriental legacy, given its validity, should be only a part of the past of the historian research in India. I think it is a past.
Okay.
Any more questions? You can write the questions. You can write the questions in the chat. Any questions? Don't be shy. शर्माइए मत. पूछने में कोई शर्म नहीं है. पूछने में कोई भी शर्म नहीं है. आप बताइए अलीगढ़ में कैसा मौसम है?
It's good morning, ma'am. I'm a research scholar from Aligarh Muslim University. It's so nice to have to hear your lecture, and it was really very enlightening. It's really cold here. I've been here. I'm pursuing my research since last 4.5 years, and I think I haven't seen such cold years, was cold winters, harsh winters here in the last 4.5
How
years.
many?
It's really very cold here these days.
कितना सेंटीग्रेड है? कितने
I think
degrees?
I'm not exactly sure about the temperature, but I think 2 days back it was 3.5. Although I belong to a very cold area. I'm from Kashmir. I'm a valley girl. The temperature there goes down sub-zero. I'm used to such low temperatures back there in the valley, but this time in Aligarh it's really cold here. Ma'am, I have a question. I wanted to know ma'am, have you heard of Bernard Cohen's Colonialism and Its Forms of Knowledge? The book
Yes.
he wrote, it's a very famous book.
Yes, yes.
In that book he says it was this colonial ambitious project of knowing about India's past, its traditions and science, and because they did this because they wanted to know more about India's traditions and past so as to hegemonize and colonize people's minds better. So how far do you agree with his opinion?
Thank you. To
He
begin
has
with, my compassion with you having plus 35, 3.5. Salam from Moscow having minus 10.
oh my god. Okay.
Salam
Yeah,
from our
yeah.
minus 10. And there have been snowstorms for the last 3 days. For your question, yes, it is right. Though, of course, they wanted to rule over India and to know more about India. But interestingly, with this assumption, I fully agree. But interestingly, that it has to be discussed whether what was more, they learned India or they imagined India. That's interesting thing. Not just know about India, because if they wanted to know about India, they would not leave unnoticed the huge historical tradition of every people and every community of India. If you want to know, you will go and see it, as Todd did. Todd did it, and he was bombarded with criticism for that. So if you want to study, you see. But if you study to imagine, if Edward Said was right when he wrote that an Orientalist first creates a theory and then tries to find facts which are in cooperation with this theory. Whatever is not in conformation with this theory, he will just discard. If I know that there is no historical book texts and historical documents and historical thinking in India, then I will close my eyes on this historical tradition. This is the question. So we have to discuss whether they wanted more to know, to learn, or to imagine. And I have a strong feeling that the latter is true. They imagined according to their theories with which they came. This English gentleman would come to India already with a theory. Already, he did not see India, he did not touch India, but he already had a theory. And when he came to India, he would try to find whatever is corresponding to this theory. That's why it was not just to know, but to imagine. Now, Saif Ali has written, can we write history on the basis of memory? Memory is one of the sources of history, only one. Memory is, of course, individual memory can fail anytime. Then there are special studies how events are condensed in our memory. And third, memory is constructed. Memory is constructed and reconstructed by those people who are in power. For example, you know about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan by the Americans. When lakhs of people were burned to ashes and other lakhs died from this horrible disease, now the young Japanese are taught at school that they should be thankful to the Americans for this bombing. These young people whose grandfathers and grandmothers died in horrible, torturous death. And some of them are still carrying these genetically, the consequences of this atomic bombing. And they are taught, and they are saying, oh, well, it was, of course, it was a little bit hard, but nevertheless, we should be thankful. Because democracy came to Japan and this kind of thing. So human memory, if somebody, I'm sorry, if somebody misbehaves with some member of your family or something, you will remember it. And now they're teaching you that the person who did it was meaning good for you and for your family. So human memory is unfortunately very fragile and very flexible to admit anything given, inculcated by those who have power. And in our epoch, in the epoch of internet, in the epoch of media, those who control it, they can inculcate many horrible things into the minds of the people. Like the question of Japanese, which I have given you now. So memory is a good source, but it should never be the only source. Otherwise, it is difficult. So, any questions? Then please, thank you. Then I would like, because I think our time is passing, and I'm grateful for Gulfishan Sahaba, for all of you, to all the colleagues and students for attending this lecture.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, please. Should we end the session? Is there anybody who is in charge? Because I'm looking at the watches that our time is expiring. Hello, Gulfishan ma'am? Is it 12 Indian time? Hello? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it the end of our session? It was scheduled up to 12 Indian time. Is it 12 IST? Because I'm looking at my Moscow watches. Is it 12 in India?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So let me wish all the best to all of you. So it is the end as it was scheduled up to 12 IST. I hope Professor Gulfishan Khan will come. Is she inside? So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am.